Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm your host, Meghan Henry, and today I am joined by Nick Turdo. And Nick is the director of claims at a new startup company, Metrix 360. And he's coming on to talk about, not only his journey into claims, but, coming into a startup and like having the ability to build a department and a team from the ground up and the excitement and the challenges to that. And I found it so interesting when I was chatting with him about it, and being in a similar position, like starting a new office for Cruiser Mitchell. Like I could relate to a lot of what he was saying about putting systems into place. So I was like, come on and let's talk about it." So with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good morning, Nick. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm great, and I'm so happy you were able to join me. Just for our listeners out there, you and I had talked about like a year and a half ago, and we had talked about getting you on my prior podcast, and just the stars didn't align. And we recently reconnected, and the stars are aligned. So here you are. But what before we get into it,
I'm here.
before we get into it, into the meat of it, I wanted to talk a little bit about your background. Because when we talked last, you were at a different company than you're at now, which we're going to dig into a little bit as we move along. But on this program, I talked to a lot of people about how they got into claims or how they got into law or defensive claims and this and that, and everyone's story is so different and interesting. So having said that, I'd love to hear what your path was to this wide world of claims, because I will say no one's path has been a straight line. And I think that's why I like to ask this question, because I'm always so curious at everyone's bob and weave at how you got to where you are right now. So, what was your journey into claims?
So I got my first job was with Sedgwick, which I'm sure most people know as a TPA, one of the biggest TPAs. A friend of mine that I worked at a restaurant growing up all through high school and college, and a friend of mine that I worked there with had just gotten hired there, and I ran into him one time and he said, "I can get you an interview." I was like, "I'll take anything at this point." I just got done school. I really didn't have, not that I didn't have a plan, but I really didn't care what I did. I just wanted to do something. I was tired of that restaurant life. I was 22, 23. So got the interview, got the job with Sedgwick. I didn't know what a claim was. I didn't know this whole industry existed exactly. So I got in there, and I remember my first week or two, I was training to handle claims. There was no training structure at all. It was kind of a sink or swim. You either did or you didn't. And I was training to take over for a woman that's going out on maternity leave, and she ended up going out way earlier than expected, like months earlier. So I thought I had this 3-month lead up going in, and I ended up having 2 weeks. So I got thrown 180 claims of all these different jurisdictions, and really didn't know what I was doing. And I swam, thankfully. I didn't sink. So then I went from there. I did that for 3 years as an adjuster, and then I got promoted to a team leader, like a supervisor. I brought friends of mine in too, so we had a really it was a fun environment when I first started. So we had 3 or 4 people that were so that was a lot of fun to start with. And then friend of mine both got promoted at the same time. We're both supervisors together, kind of learning our way and figuring out how to supervise people and go that whole route. Did that for about 3 years, all with Sedgwick. And then I was promoted to program manager, basically managing the relationship between Sedgwick and the client. I did that for a year and a half, 2 years. Didn't love that as much as I thought I was going to. And eventually ended up going back to supervisor. And did that for another 6 to 8 months before I got a job on the client side. So the TPA world was great. Well, as good as it could be. And it was time to go. It's a hectic world. It's a fast pace, and you're always kind of always drowning, on the verge of drowning a little bit. So when the client job came up, I took the job with, it's called NFI. It was a trucking logistics company.
You know, I think it's funny, or not funny, but I think coming from the restaurant world, I think that sort of does prepare you a little bit for claims, because you have to be able to juggle quite a bit in the restaurant world. So when you were working in the restaurant world, were you like a server, or did you work in the back of the house, the front of the house? What was your role there?
I was a server, and I ended up hiring other people from that same restaurant and other restaurants around. We found it's weird,
Really?
but all the people I came up with, we all worked in restaurants, and we found that that was like the best foundation for claims, because you're
Yes.
always handling different people with different personalities, and it's the same way with claims. It's very similar, as much as different as they are. They're very similar.
Yeah, there's always a fire. There's always like there's always something you have to jump to, and you have to remember all these
Yep.
things at once for different types of things. And like you have, in this way, you have deadlines too, because you're like, okay, well, I got to get back to table 4. They they
Yeah.
need their Coke and their appetizer, and then I have to go to
Right.
table like it really does prepare you for juggling lots of things.
Yep. And that's what we did. We only hired, not only, but we looked at people that worked in restaurants, and we gave them kind of a bump to the top when we were hiring people. It was a very good foundation to have, I think.
And also just client interaction, right? It's same like with dealing with or working with insureds and claimants. Like you have to have a certain, demeanor around, your insureds or claimants. And, as you do as with patrons in a restaurant, right? Like you have to be polite and kind and, receptive to what they're asking. And, it teaches you a lot.
Yes.
Mm.
And you realize when someone doesn't have that experience, when they have never worked in some sort of service, they didn't have that polished ability. Like they got upset or mad when someone came down on them, like a client came down on them or asked them to do something a little bit different. And for me, it was just everyday life. Like that was just what I was used to. It was like, okay, like you just say yes to everything, and eventually they're gonna be happy. And same thing with restaurant.
Yeah.
It translates very well.
Yeah. I too worked in restaurants throughout my my younger life, and so I can understand. I completely can understand and relate.
Yes,
Um, and honestly, it's a skill that I think everyone should have to do at some point. I just think it's
I
something
agree.
that
I agree.
like restaurants and
And not even
retail, I
just
think
with
are
claims
things.
or right. Dealing with the public is something that everyone should have to do. Just to have an appreciation for other people a little bit and understand where other people are coming from. Because without that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I'll be able to relate to people now without having that experience.
Yeah. So when you first started in claims, though, and you were trying to keep your head above water, did you know did you have any sort of mentor or anyone that you could go to help, or was it just like you had to figure it out yourself? Like how 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 was that experience for you?
So, so the kid that actually got me the job, the guy that got me the job, ended up being my boss, and him and I are still close to this day. And he's now a superstar. But he was awesome. He kind of new to his role as well. So we both learned together and figured it out together. And he took me under his wing and really, I wouldn't be where I am today without him. That's for sure. And there's multiple people that I can say that about him. So he was a great
Yeah.
person to kind of learn from. And he had set the bar very high and led by a good example.
Yeah. Um and like that's such a great experience to have too, because like you may be at different places or gone different ways, but like that's a connection that you always will have, and you never know where it could lead you in the future. Like I mean, I found that throughout my own career too. Like there's just certain people that you connect with that are so integral to your growth in whatever industry that you're in, and keeping up those connections is so important.
Yeah.
um
Right. And I always
Now,
think, like, what if he never asked me about that interview or anything like that, like
yeah.
where I would be today? I don't know what I'd be doing. It's crazy.
Yeah. So what about some of the other folks that your restaurant buddies that you brought on too? Are they still in claims, or is it like a mixed bag?
One of them still is. I'm very close with him. A couple others kind of came and went. They might be going to other companies and other TPAs, but most of them are still within the industry. It's kind of like the thing where once you're in, you really don't get out. By the time you realize that you're this far in, it's hard to make a change at that point. It's all you know, and you're kind of stuck. Whether it's good or
It's like
bad, you're kind of stuck.
a little Hotel California.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave. Uh, so,
Right.
you know,
Exactly.
you had mentioned like being in the TPA world for a while, and then going into a company. Now, what was that change like for you? Now suddenly you're in like a risk management department for a company versus working at a TPA. How was that transition for you?
So when that option came up, it was always high on my priority list. I always thought I wanted to go to that side and kind of be the boss, quote unquote, and kind of tell people what to do. And when insurance company wise, and when that came up, it was a great opportunity. Those jobs don't come up very often. I interviewed, everything kind of felt right, but Cedric was my only job at that point, and I didn't really know the other side. Like sometimes the grass isn't always greener. But when I made that jump, my boss at the trucking company was former Cedric employee. Came from the same place. We kind of had the same mentality when it came to things. We hit it off right away. And and when we went there was no claims management. There was a claims management system, or there are people in place, but it wasn't done the right way.
Yeah.
They were just blowing money, and we were kind of brought on to kind of right the ship a little bit, and we did. First few years we saved millions of dollars, and it was honestly easy. It wasn't hard whatsoever because it was just basically claims 101. It was simple stuff. We were just kind of cutting back on things and not letting claims linger for too long and settling things when we had the opportunity to. And companies as itself was growing, and we were still cutting costs, like millions of dollars each year. And we were like doubling in size, and we're still cutting costs. And we knew eventually it was going to catch up to us, and it was not going to be all green and everything to be perfect. But we made the best of it while we were there, and we did a great job together. I had no issues with them whatsoever. We had a great 5 years there, and we did a lot of good things.
And I mean, coming in, I mean, NFI is a giant company, right? Like, you're coast to coast. So what were some of the biggest issues that you were seeing while you were there as for claims? Because I'm sure you were seeing a lot of like, it's a trucking logistics company. So I'm sure you're seeing a lot of, trucking related claims. So what were some of your, the bigger things that you were coming across at that point?
So the biggest thing was them not, like, the locations not knowing comp or claims or insurance whatsoever. So basically teaching them from the top. And I always told them, my go-to line was, you guys have enough on your plates. You don't need to know comp as well. No one knows comp. And that's what I'm here to kind of guide you through it and steer you through it. So they had no clue what was what, and they were just blowing money. They didn't know how they were spending money. It was just being spent. So my boss and then our risk manager put this program in place where they were money was going towards the claims, and they were basically paying for what the injuries they had, made them accountable for what they were doing. So that helped kind of make them aware of everything. But teaching them I had found it fun because they had no clue. And then when I taught them and kind of explained the situation to them, explained the scenarios, they really took a liking to it and had an involvement in it. And that's the best part, is when they start buying into what you're pitching. It made it really easy at that point.
Yeah. But I can imagine at the beginning it was probably a little difficult because it's hard to get people to embrace change, right? And when things have been done a certain way, or in your case, maybe it sounds like not much of a way, and now suddenly there's these big changes implemented. I'm sure you got some pushback with it.
Oh yeah. And keep in mind, we're dealing with truckers and warehouse workers.
Yeah.
Where these aren't the most polished guys in the world, where they hear about an injury and they say, well, this guy's an idiot, let's just deny the claim. I was like, well, we can't exactly do that in the state. Like just because he made a mistake doesn't that. So that was a challenge as well, is like that learning curve, and then just being like these rough, tough guys that we have to like kind of level with and say, this is not really how things are done. That was a challenge too. So you have the size of the company growing, a lot of turnover when it comes to that industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Trying to teach everyone new things, different states, different jurisdictions. It was a challenge, but it was never the volume that Cedric was, and that's what I always found. Cedric was more of like a volume type place, where NFI was you're more using your brain rather than just working and just pumping out claims. It was more brain related and more you had to be smarter for that, I think.
And I'm sure that was like a welcome change though too, because you have to be able to do both, right? Like the you have to be able to handle the volume, and you also want the cerebral work as well. So it was it's a building, right? Because you came off the volume, and now you're like, okay, now I know if the volume starts coming on, I know how to handle that. But now you can use your brain a little bit differently and put in procedures in place that kind of account for the income, the volume that might be incoming, right?
Right. And we didn't. There was never a time where we thought, this isn't going to work, or what we were doing wasn't right. We'd already bought in. That wasn't the issue. And the difference between NFI and then Sedgwick was we were seeing numbers change on a daily basis. And or Sedgwick, you're just doing things. You're checking these boxes. There's more than one way to do a claim. And Sedgwick had all these boxes you had to check and things you had to make sure you completed by certain dates and deadlines and that kind of thing. Where NFI, we just kind of did what we wanted to do. There was no rules in place. We kind of made our own rules.
Yeah.
And we did think, there's common sense with claims handling in general. But when we were with NFI, it was a lot easier to just kind of do what you thought was the right thing to do. And that's what we ended up doing.
Well, it's almost you created your own system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't have to worry about anyone looking over us or watching what we were doing. We were the people in charge, which was awesome.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity, and which segues into right where you are now, right? So let's talk a little bit about that too, because so now you are at Metrix 360, which is a new company. So you again have this opportunity to build your claims handling policies, I should say, yourself, right? So but before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit like how you got there, because I think you and I had talked, like, it wasn't something you were looking for. It just kind of fell into your lap and was kind of an opportunity that I don't blame you for 1 millisecond that you had to take. But talk a little bit about how it all happened for you.
Yeah, so I had no issues. I was happy with NFI. I really wasn't looking for anything. I had someone message me on LinkedIn, recruiter, and they said we have this opportunity. And I was like, all right, I'll listen to multiple. So I had a couple calls with them. They kind of felt me out, and then I went to the COO of Metrix. And every step of the way, I was like, all right, it gets better and better as time's going on. And I kept going to the next steps. And I wasn't like preparing for the interviews. It was really I was just talking. So it never was really a challenge. So I went to the COO, talked to her, then I went to the CEO, Jared, who I spoke to him, and everything meshed really well with what I was looking to do and what they were looking for. Everything, probably 8 or 9 interviews, 3 months, almost 4 months. So it was a long hiring process, which was good because it kind of let me get ending NFI on the right foot and passing that off the right way. So when it came time for everything, it was when decision time came, it was easy for me to make that decision because I felt comfortable with the people I was working with, and I asked a lot of questions myself. They were interviewing me, but I was also interviewing them because I wanted to make sure if I did this jump, I was leaving a really good situation I was in. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect and the people I was going to be reporting to was good, and having the ability to kind of do what I wanted for the most part. And so far, that's been the case.
Yeah, I mean, because there's there's definitely a risk involved, right? Like, because you're going from a well-established company. Oh wait, hang on, we got some feedback. Wait, I'm gonna halt right there. Like, did something happen with your connection? Because like now I'm hearing myself on your end. Like there's feedback.
just went. I unplugged my computer from my screens. No, everything's still. I still have full connection.
Okay. No, I was just like hearing myself talk. Oh, I'm hearing myself again.
Okay.
Hang on.
Should I take these out?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe let's try like no AirPods. Maybe that's the problem right now. Let's see. Is it better?
How's that?
No. Put them back in. Hang on. Let's see.
Now I can't hear you.
Here, we're gonna. You can't hear me? All right, back to recording. Okay. Some technical difficulties. Back to recording. But what I was saying is, there was definitely certainly some risk involved because you're going from NFI, which is a longstanding, well-established company, to a startup, and you have to. I mean, you're definitely taking a chance. So for any job, you should be interviewing the job as much as they are interviewing you. That just should be standard. But especially for you coming in this position, you're leaving a very solid, secure place to kind of take a little bit of a risk. So it is just as important to be interviewing them. And I'm curious, like, what was in your mind at that point? Like, what were you looking for to establish to feel comfortable with making the move?
I wanted more responsibility, and I wanted more like leeway and more freedom. So with my job with NFI, my boss was there a month before me. He was about 12 years older than me, and he basically guaranteed that he was not going anywhere on his own volition, at least. So I had another 12 years to wait out to take over for him, which I could have done. I would have been fine doing that. I would have been very comfortable doing that. And I would have been fine doing it for the next 12 years. I would have been okay with my raises and my bonuses. I would have been fine. But this opportunity came up to get more responsibility and take on more and have more just say in what happens and kind of molding a company, kind of what we did with NFI. Because when we got to NFI, there was nothing there either.
Yeah.
And now this company, it's the same thing. There's no director of claims. My boss, she's the COO. She has an underwriting background in comp, but she doesn't know the claim side. And then our CEO, Jared, is a liability attorney. So no one really had the workers' comp claims background, which I had. Working with TPAs, working with insurers, this is the perfect mix because we are a risk management company that is kind of the go-between between the insurance company and the actual insurance. So it's a little bit different from what I was doing before. It's kind of a hybrid of all the jobs I was doing, which is actually perfect for me.
Yeah. And I just have to add this for anyone listening out there, that Jared, your CEO, you and I discovered this when I was talking to you before. I've known Jared since like 9th grade. So I didn't even know he was the CEO of this company until you told me. And it's funny. And it's just like small worlds colliding. And I suggested that he could join us, but I was supposed to talk to him before we recorded, but we haven't connected. But small worlds.
Yes,
but,
absolutely.
But so before we get into, kind of your role and how it is going into a startup, tell us a little bit about what Metrix 360 does, and then we can talk a little bit more about what you're doing and how you're building up your department. Because you just touched on it a little bit.
So we're a risk management company.
Kind of the intermediary.
Right. So it's a risk management company. It's a spin-off. Sorry. It's a spin-off of a brokerage, the insurance brokerage. So the brokerage in place. Everyone that's with Metrix now was under this brokerage called Grandview, and now we're split off in a separate risk management company. So the brokerage is still doing the brokerage job, but they're now referring the work as a risk management company for these companies that don't have the bandwidth, the ability, the manpower to handle their own claims. So we sort of do that for them. So we're basically the client. The insurance companies, the TPAs come directly to us. We make the decisions for them. They really don't have much say in anything that they're doing as far as money-wise or accepting, denying, all that stuff. We kind of take it and run with it. So that part's nice because we are technically the insured. The challenges, well, there's not many challenges right now, but the challenges are eventually going to be merging everything together into one place. But we're in the process of getting more clients, more insureds. Most of them are like home health, nursing home types, which is a different world where I come from. But it's a lot of lifting injuries, back injuries, slip and falls, that kind of thing. And you're not controlling the environment they're in, which always makes things challenging. They're at customers' houses or at a store with a client, that kind of thing. So that's always a separate challenge. A lot of third-party stuff, a lot of sub-rows, slip and falls. So that's in teaching everyone. The people under me, we call them claim specialists. They don't have experience with actually handling claims. This is their experience, is this kind of thing. So teaching them the claims world, teaching them what to accept, what to say, what to deny, that kind of thing, and starting a good foundation. We're training from the ground up of claims in general, and they know claims because they're in them every day, but they don't know what to deny, what to accept, what to say at the beginning of the claim, what signs to look for when someone says, they're talking to an attorney, what to expect next, or that kind of thing. So that's the biggest challenge then, is teaching them as well as building the program out and making it so it's healthy and runs smoothly, rather than, there's a lot of ups and downs right now. I'm trying to work through everything and trying to change things, but not change everything.
Yeah. But I mean, it's almost like it's come full circle for you in some respects, because you not long ago at Sedgwick knew nothing about claims and you had to learn it, right? And so now you're in a position that you're in this, leadership position, but you can relate to your claims examiners because you were like, I was there, I understand not knowing what you're doing, and I'm here to help you, to teach you what you're doing. Like, you've taken on them as that kind of that mentor role that you had someone have for you. So it's, it really has come full circle for you.
Yeah, I try to put myself in their shoes because I was there. And I think that's helped me along the way every step, because I know what it's like to be on the front lines. I know what it's like to be an adjuster. I know what it's like to get just hit every day with something new and never know which way's up. And you have a ton of questions. I get that. I've been there, and I try to, I sympathize with that a little bit because I've been in those shoes. So when I'm teaching someone, I teach them from the ground up. Sometimes I'm still look around. I can't believe I am not an adjuster anymore, and that I came from that world. Like, I feel so far away that I was an adjuster, but you never forget. Like, that stuff doesn't go away. You'll still have those battle scars of, handling claims from day one and getting yelled at, hung up on, and screamed at from people that are mad about a number of things. So that part is all, you got to have real thick skin to be in this world. So I teach them that. I try to teach from how I would do things. I always say there's a right way and there's a way that you're going to do them. So I'll teach you both, and you figure something out in the middle. And I say this a lot, I don't care how you get to the end point. So you start at one side of the claim and you get to the end. I don't care how you go, as long as you get here the right way. So that's my number one takeaway that I tell people is there's many different ways to do things. No two people are going to handle claims the same way. They're not going to say the same things. They're not going to do the same things. But as long as we get to the end point, the same end point, that's all that matters. I'm not about checking boxes. I'm not someone that's going to worry about, oh, you didn't do this timely or that kind of thing. There's no rules when it comes to that. I'm more about the end result than anything else.
Yeah. Well, and frankly, like, there could be, like, we talk about this in litigation as well. Like, there's a goal in mind, which is like the win for the client, and how you get there. Like, you should be creative in how you can get there. There's not necessarily a linear path, and you might learn something too from your claims folks. Like, if they got to the end result and you're like, oh, what was your process, and they tell you like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. Maybe it opens up your eyes to some new way to handle a claim that you might not have thought of before.
Yeah, especially in comp, there's so many different ways to go. I have different mentalities when it comes to certain things, and some people might look at them as not 100% right all the time, but they get the job done. And my job is to make the client happy. My role now is to make the client happy and to get the best result for them. So there's times where I think the employee, the injured worker, is going to think that they won, and I'm going to think that I won. And that's the perfect mix, because they're saying yes to a settlement that they think is awesome, and I'm saying yes to a settlement that I think is awesome for me. So there's times where both people are happy, which is fine. That's the happy world you want to be in, because you don't have people that are mad at you for denying your claim or turning them down for something. But at the same time, they're getting what they think is they deserve, and we're getting a good deal on a cheap claim.
Yeah. So coming in though, now being at a startup, like what are some of the challenges that you've had? I imagine like there are plenty of challenges going into a new company, especially coming from a long-standing, well-established, large company to somewhere new. So what are some of the challenges you've experienced?
I guess one is there's not like claim count. We don't really know who's got what or that kind of thing. Getting a good handle on what clients belong to who, what states we have, who has this many number of states. Because I say all the time, handling 100 New York claims is a lot different than handling 100 New Jersey claims or Pennsylvania claims. Every state's different. We're in a lot of states, but not a ton in a lot of states. So the main exposures to New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, which are some challenging states. But the biggest challenge was getting a handle on what's what. And every time I think I make progress, I had to go back and redo something. So I've been saying every day is I take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So we're getting there eventually, but it's a lot of restarting and starting from the ground up and getting everything in one place. The challenges of teaching everyone, my way of doing things and trying not to change too much at once, because I want them to be receptive to what I'm saying. If I come in and change everything, no one's going to be open to that, or they're not going to be receptive to that in any way. So trying to do a little bit at a time, teach them a little bit at a time, and make them feel comfortable with coming to me with questions so we can steer things in the right direction and mold. Everyone's young, everyone's kind of new to claims in general, but mold them the right way and mold them, which I think is the best way and most efficient way of handling claims.
And I imagine though, from talking to I've talked to a few people at startups, and one of the challenges I've heard is money, in the sense that like you have to be like, not that you don't have to be mindful at larger companies about how you're spending money, but you have to be extra mindful of what you're using money for systems and processes, and just like because you're building, so you can't just like blow your boat on everything at the very start, because you're building up, right? Like, so have you found that to be a little bit of a challenge too?
Not yet. The ownership has been really good with saying that, I'm ready to take the plunge and do this all the way and do it the right way. And so far, I haven't really asked to spend any money, to be fair. But he's very good about saying we'll spend what we find necessary. And that's part of the reason I came, is because he reassured me of everything, saying I'm ready to kind of jump all in. I want to make this into a bigger thing. It's not going to be this small brokerage or this small risk management company. I want to make this as big as it goes. So and if I'm over top of it and I can kind of build this out myself the way I think is the right way, that's really was the driving force behind this. And money does not seem to be an issue so far. So that was really reassuring when I interviewed, to see that he was willing to kind of go all in with everything. He's got multiple companies and a lot of things happening. So I felt good about that. He's not really overseeing everything on a day-to-day basis, which is good. So we have the freedom to do what we want. We have to get some approvals here and there, and him to be on board with some of the stuff we're doing. But for the most part, there hasn't been any pushback when it comes to money, which is a good thing when you're building out a new company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I remember talking to someone on another podcast, and it was a startup, and they were talking about like, well, like we want this new like claim system, but we also like need to do this, so we have to like kind of have to pick what's on the table for right now and table the other one for later. So that's good that you're not having those growing pains.
Yeah,
but
and that's something we're in the market for, is a claim system that I can relate to that pretty closely. That's something we're doing right now, is looking for that.
So but how about coming into like a new team? Like, how did you approach being like the new guy, and developing some camaraderie with this new team, especially a young team, like you said? Like, how did you go about like building that up? Because that can be a challenge as well.
Yeah, so day one, I met with everyone, introduced myself, kind of gave a history of myself and my background, let them know that I was on board with everything they wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that they could come to me with questions and issues. I didn't want them to feel uncomfortable with anything. I wanted to make sure that I was kind of their go-to person. I met with each one individually, kind of got their feel on what they liked best, what they didn't like best, what they thought could be different, done differently, or changed, and got their notes. And I'm putting everything together and kind of going from there. So my first goal was to really build rapport with them and make them feel comfortable coming to me with questions or issues they had. So that was my step one. And then going forward, it's just gonna be the same thing, just more of making sure they're comfortable, coming to us with any issues they have, and then changing things as we change things. Make sure everyone's on board. Now, everything's not going to be perfect with that, but we have to change some things along the way, and they'll be okay with some change here and there.
Yeah. Now, and if I'm understanding correctly about the general dynamic is, so, you're working with outside companies and you have like the home health people going into homes. Now, are you able, or is the goal to work with, your clients to develop like protocols and procedures to mitigate their own risk when they're going into these own homes? Like so much like in a way, like having procedures in place being like to prevent on-site incidents.
Yeah, so we have a guy that is in charge of that, kind of like a health safety person that offers on-site care and kind of shows them the right way to lift and that kind of thing, and analyzes their injuries and say what they could do differently and do better. So he's part of the team as well. So that was already in place when I got here. I know he's newer too, but he does a good job of kind of analyzing what some of their major injuries are and what they could change to make that stuff go a little smoother or eliminate them entirely. And then I come over with the ability to kind of train locations as to when someone's injured. I have a whole PowerPoint thing that I present to new locations or new clients that come on board saying, when someone's injured, do X, Y, and Z, or don't do this, or what to look out for, that kind of thing. So I think those two combined are a good way to kind of set up the employers because they don't know comp. They're not going to know insurance. They barely have a grasp on what they're paying for or what they're looking, at when it comes to claims. So if I can give them some sort of guidance to getting off on the right foot and limiting the number of claims they have, that's going to save them money right off the bat. So that we're proving our worth right off the bat to show, this is why you should be with us and stick with us going forward.
It's almost like you're in not like a consulting role, but like you're giving some consulting feedback as to best like practices for risk management to mitigate their own risks that they're looking at that that would come across your desk.
Right. It's a really fine line between like health and safety and comp in general. So like, I try to toe that line carefully because I don't want to overstep and go into like the safety part because I don't really have experience when it comes to preventing claims or proper techniques or that kind of thing. I just know from what I see of how to prevent things going forward and maybe things to eliminate so that stuff doesn't happen in the future.
And I imagine too that you will see a fair amount of like third-party liability claims too. It's not just comp claims that you're going to see with, in this line of work. Because I'm sure there's incidents that happen with transport, from moving someone from a bed to a wheelchair and transit, like, or if you're doing any sort of paratransport or anything like that. But have you seen much of that come across as of yet, or is that down the line, you think?
I've seen a lot of like if we have a customer or a employee that's at a customer's house or a client's house, right, and they slip in their house, or they're at the grocery store with them, helping them get their groceries, and they slip in the grocery store. Which that stuff is always very convoluted as to who's responsible. Did we do something? Did the employee do something wrong with doing something they're supposed to be doing? That kind of thing. And then you go after the customer. If you're injuring someone's house, you go after them as a third-party case. It's a really fine line, and we let the insurers kind of make that decision. The clients make that decision. But when it comes to like big like grocery store claims, for example, we have no problem going after them. So that stuff is always tricky because it just delays the process of a comp claim and makes things more intertwined with third-party cases and settling the liens and that kind of thing. So it's not my favorite thing, but it's something that we're going to have to deal with. And I'm trying to teach everyone the best way to go about it because those things can get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They certainly can. So you know, having been in this comp space for some time, what are some, tools or procedures that you've learned over time that like you kind of advise with NFI and now in your current position, like you advise the clients like, all right, these are like some of the practices that you should put forward to mitigate your potential future comp risk.
I tell them to report everything, which I know might not be a very popular opinion among comp people, but I'd rather have record of something happening, whether we deny it or nothing ever comes of it. But it costs very minimal to report an incident only or like a no treatment claim. Have it on the record, because if they come back in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, we wouldn't be able to say, no, you didn't. It wasn't your elbow, it was your wrist or it was your knee or whatever. So I'd like to have my bases covered when it comes to that. I might be on the aggressive side when it comes to reporting. I want everything reported. And I'm also a big proponent of these nurse triage lines. I know they're out there of, one number calling all claims. The nurse kind of troubleshoots it from the get-go. It limits emergency room visits. It limits treatment altogether. A lot of times they'll recommend like self-care for the employee. They go home, ice their knee, ice their shoulder, whatever the case is, and call back tomorrow. And 9 times out of 10, they are feeling better by the morning. So instead of incurring all these emergency room visits off the bat, we send them there to the nurse. The nurse kind of troubleshoots them. It makes the employee feel comfortable they're talking to someone that's kind of qualified to talk to, where it's a nurse rather than just some random person on the phone that they don't know from the insurance company. So a lot of people look at the insurance companies like these big bad people that are looking to deny their claims. If they're talking to a nurse first, it kind of puts their worries at ease a little bit. So those are 2 things I kind of started to implement off the bat with Metrix is get everything reported. And let's get a nurse line set up ASAP, because the sooner we can do it, there's less lag time. You don't have HR managers or employers sitting on these claims waiting to report them in bulk or whatever. They go to right away within like 5 days, and they're set up right away.
Yeah, and I 100% agree though with the reporting regardless. Like I say this to even like on GL claims, like do the incident report regardless. If there's no injury or just do the incident report, because who knows what's going to happen. At least you have this that was made in real time of what the situation was at that time. And it's not going to hurt you later if you consistently always do incident reports and it's part of your business practice, and you have this report that says, okay, no injury noted. Now, could that change later? Sure. But at least like at the outset, like if there is some sort of defense too, that there was in fact no injury, and then you have this report saying, oh, they said they weren't hurt or whatever it may be, it always helps.
And fresh in your mind. Do it while it's fresh in your mind, because otherwise it's going to go away and you're going to forget about some of the details, or they said this or that. Just do it right away so you don't forget. And this way it's there and you have it on record. Even if you don't do anything with it, just put it in a file so you have it and you can come back to it later.
Yeah, totally. And I can't even stress enough about doing it right away, because I found so many times that, you have the incident reports that are like a day later, and that's always when there's the question, like, well, why didn't you do it that day? Like, why was it done later? And that causes more problems than good. So the business practices do it at that time, every time.
Yes, right away. Yep.
So where do you envision your department growing, or like if it were up to you, like what do you see for the future of this department that you yourself are able to build and grow yourself?
I want to make it so the people that are under me have all the knowledge they need to, where someone comes to them with questions and they can answer right away, where we are the go-to for everything. There's not a lag with things. We're making decisions on behalf of the client. I would love to get to the point where we the client hires us and we make all decisions, everything right away, without having to check in, and the people under me have the ability to kind of do it on their own, like where we are the client. I want to get to where I am, essentially. And I always look at that as, if I teach them my way of doing things, they'll grow. They're going to grow by seeing every aspect of the claim. I want them to see from start to finish. I want them to see through the settlements, have the conversations with the attorneys, and kind of be the adjuster for the adjuster, essentially. And I don't want it to be where the adjusters kind of run the show or the attorneys run the show. I want them to be totally involved in everything because that's the best way to learn. That's how I learned. That's how the people around me coming up have learned. That's how you learn claims in general. You're going to learn jurisdictions. You're going to be well versed for whatever you decide to do next. And I want to see them just grow as individuals and kind of be the go-to for the clients. And the clients themselves, I mean, they don't, like I said, they don't have a true hand in what we're doing. But if we start doing a good job, we're going to get around that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and saving people money across the board. Yeah. And we implement and use as many vendors and connections as we all have. That's what I think is the best way to go about this. And that's where I eventually want to see this go, where we turn into a big time risk management company where people kind of just send it to us, set it, forget it, and kind of let us handle it from there and watch the savings come in.
Yeah. I mean, look, anytime you're saving in company's money, I feel like people are gonna get on board. So I mean, I know you had mentioned too.
It's easy. You just gotta
right. And I know you had mentioned most of what you're seeing is PA, New Jersey, and New York. You know, and I don't personally do comp work, but I know from GL litigation, like some of those jurisdictions can be quite problematic from, just from a cost perspective. Is that something that you see on the comp side too? And if so, like which areas are more troublesome for you than others?
So New York, admittedly, I don't know as well as the others. I came up handling Jersey, PA, those states, and those I know like the back of my hand still. But New York, I don't know as well. And New York is very expensive and very employee friendly. So those are the challenges we're going to have, no doubt. But we have attorneys that I've kind of brought in to start training and get. If they're going to learn, I want them to learn the right way and learn from the attorneys. Since I don't know New York as some other states, I can get by because at the end of the day, claims are claims. But when it comes to dollar amounts and that kind of thing, I don't know where to place things yet. So the jurisdictions we're in are hard. Connecticut's another one. We have some California coming up. So all the expensive states we're in them.
Yeah.
And honestly, what states are good? There's really not any good states. So we're looking to kind of minimize things all around and go about things the right way. And that's, I think, the best way. The way we're going to be able to save the money the most is you have a good foundation, start from the ground up, and think good things will come after that.
Yeah. I mean, it is true. You have hit some of the more troublesome states that are at the top of your roster there. But you got to start somewhere, right? Have you seen though in your industry though, there's like certain areas that are more prone to you seeing more claims? I mean, as you were saying, it's like the lifting. So I imagine you see a lot of like back strain type comp claims from like lifting clients from one thing to the next. Is that kind of the majority of what you're seeing, or is it a mixed bag?
Mixed bag, but a lot of it is so a couple things. One, it's lifting. You're always going to have issues when you're lifting people or individuals, or either the team lifts. You're still going to have issues. If someone slips or not lifting all their weight, that kind of thing. A lot of slip and falls that's always going to be an issue. You're never going to eliminate them entirely. And I want to get to a point where, as long as we're eliminating the lack of common sense claims. So if it's a team lift, let's make it a team lift. Let's not try to do it by yourself. Don't be a hero. And that's where the safety guys are going to come in and kind of teach them that, where anything over X amount of pounds, let's have another person help out when possible. And let's lift with our legs and not our back. Just honestly simple things, because those are the ways you're going to eliminate claims, and having a better standard for starting claims off. Because if you get started on the right foot, where someone strains their back from lifting the right way, okay, that's going to happen. I mean, people are heavy, individuals are heavy. Moving people from a bed to a wheelchair or whatever is going to cause some issues. But if we're doing it the right way, you're going to eliminate them right off the bat, and that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, right. Like you have to get to the start of trying to eliminate it versus, I mean, look, you have to deal with it after as well. But if you can try to work on mitigating and have less claims to start, that's going to be helpful, down the line.
Right.
So, and I'm jumping around a tiny bit, but I was just thinking about this though, because when you and I were talking, your claims team though is a little bit spread out, and I know is that sometimes a challenge to be working, like, especially with a newer claims team, when you're a little geographically spread out, or is it work fine just because of our our environment, that claims typically, like, we all communicate online anyway, but I imagine there is some challenges with that as well, especially being new. Like, you're new, you're coming in, you develop relationships and things.
Right. Luckily, I've met almost everyone in person.
Good.
We have two people that work for me out in Israel. So
Hmm.
I met one of them. She was here my first week, so I met her in person. The other one, we've had conversations through Teams and everything. So I've met almost everyone in person. We have an office in Brooklyn as well. We're in Lakewood in Brooklyn. So when I go up to Brooklyn, I'll meet everyone else for the first time and put a name with a face in person rather than through Teams. So it's a challenge here and there. The two girls in Israel are really good. They work pretty much our hours for the most part. I think it's like a 6 or 7 hour difference. So they are online,
Yeah.
where online is late at night for them. So they do a good job of being online at all times. And everyone's kind of, these days with your phones, you always have a connection somewhere. And you're always able to at least connect some way, or at least I need an answer that can say, hey, I'm taking my kid to school right now. I can get you in a second or whatever. So I'm not worried. The geographic stuff, it's sometimes challenging. For the most part, we've done a good job of eliminating any issues with it so far.
Yeah, like I've found, like, for myself, it's hard. Like, sometimes it's hard to like create that, like, closer camaraderie. Like, it's a challenge to try to figure out how to do it in the best way so people feel connected with you, and especially being connected with management, so they feel comfortable asking questions. And it sounds like you're doing it in a great way, that you've met everyone and you're trying to develop those relationships. But I think there is just an added challenge when you're not, like, in the same physical space. And I'm in that same situation too. Like, I I have a physical office, but, like, we're not all there all the time. So,
Right.
you have to be able to communicate differently. And sometimes it does prove a challenge to create that, like, that feeling. That's how I can describe, like, that feeling, and that comfortableness of, like, to ask you questions or colleagues questions about what they might, any question they might have, like, oh, hey, I have this claim, like, bouncing an idea off someone. Like, I think it can be challenging when you're not all together.
I try to be as normal as possible. So I try to level with them and give them what I think, and then I ask what they think. Or if they come with me with a
Yeah.
question, I'll start off with, "What do you think?" and let
Hmm.
them think for it on their own. And then most of the time they're right. That's the easy part. Is most of the time you're right
Yeah.
when you have an idea. I want you to kind of think on your own first, and then I'll kind of steer you in the right direction, or I'll just add something. But for the most part, they do a good job of doing that on their own. But building the rapport is, I think, just loving with them and having normal conversations, not just about
Hmm.
work, not just always
Yeah.
messaging, hey, what are you doing about this? Or what are we doing with this? Like, hey, how are you doing? How's your weekend? That kind of thing. That goes a long way with people, and it's easy.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not a hard thing to do to just be normal with someone that's reporting to you, and just ask them how they are. That goes a long way with people, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And, like, sometimes we can lose sight of it too, because, like, look, we're all busy. And
Yeah,
especially sometimes, like, you come Monday morning and you're, like, thinking about your giant to-do list, and sometimes those little things kind of go out and I'm guilty of it all the time. Because you're like, you come in Monday morning and you're like, oh geez, there's all this stuff I need to do, and you kind of
right.
can forget that, well, let's kind of work on developing the camaraderie a little bit, before worrying about, like, my to-do list. I'm guilty of it though all the time.
And everyone's got their own set of issues, and you know,
Mhm.
you have your life, I have my life. We're all doing our own thing, and we have our minds elsewhere at times. And people have kids or things going on at home. And I always tell people, if you have something going on at home, just tell me. There's more important things than work. Like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's just claims. So if you have something else going on, take care of what you need to take care of, and then let work come second, because it's not that big of a deal. We'll
Yeah.
figure it out without you for a couple hours if you need to, or a day or two. But take care of what you need to, and people really, I think, respond to that and appreciate that. Whereas they don't need to feel like I'm always, watching what they're doing. I'm not that way at all, and I don't want to ever be that way. I want them to feel comfortable coming to me if they have something going on at home. Where I don't want details by any means, but tell me you have something going on at home that you need to take care of, and we'll figure it out. Like, there's bigger
Yeah.
things than work at times.
Yes. Yeah. Although, with the caveat, you still need to work. Like, there's still that. But yes, like, we know life
Right.
happens, and there's other things that can come in the way. Um and work isn't the only thing that's going on. I found though sometimes there's people who do take advantage of that too. So it's hard to weed through that at times, because there are people who will take that and run with the freedom, so to speak.
Yeah, one of my first things I say is I will give you the longest leash possible until you make me take it away. I don't want to take it away, but if you start taking advantage of if you mistake my kindness for weakness, there'll be an issue. But so far, I haven't really had to do that much. I don't like to do that. I'm not that kind of person. I want to give people as much leeway as they want and they deserve. But there are times where you have to roll back in sometimes, and people do take advantage, unfortunately. But I try my best to kind of see the good in people when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I am guilty of that too, or I wouldn't say guilty. I have that happen to me as well. Look, I'm nice, but don't walk all over me either. I'm not stupid either.
Right. I'm nice. I'm not stupid though. Right. Yeah.
And all I want is everyone to do well and succeed, but we all have to come together and do it too, and if you need the time or you need to go do something, I'm not here to say no to it, but also just don't take advantage of me. And that goes for outside counsel as well, opposing counsel. Right. Well, Nick, we're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask you this before we close up. And I asked this of pretty much all my guests. Knowing where you are now and all the experiences that you've gone through, what advice would you give your younger self?
It does get better, because there's some dark days in my TPA days of being an adjuster, working on Saturdays and going to the office on a Saturday and working late. It does get better. Put the time in now, because the effort you put in the early stages really does benefit you later. And the other thing would be never say no. I've always said yes to things, even when I probably shouldn't have. I've said yes to things, and it's really worked out for the better. With clients, with bosses, with any situation, I always just said yes. And maybe not the best way to go about it, and may not work in every situation, but it's worked out for me pretty well. So that's kind of what I would say. Never say no, and just keep plugging away, because it does eventually get better.
And I think that's such a great advice too about, it does get better, because there are so many dark days in all of this. And sometimes you can hyper focus on that, and the bad stuff or the annoying stuff or the stressful stuff. And it is all short-lived, you just have to kind of get through it sometimes. Because look, this is a stressful business. There's time constraints. You're dealing a lot with injuries and people's emotions, and sometimes it can build and it can be a lot. And particularly, I think in comp too, when people are hurt and they're upset and they're not working, and it's affecting their livelihood. It can get emotional.
Yeah, and you're going to get yelled at. You're going to get screamed. You have to have thick skin and you got to roll with it, because it's not always going to be where people are happy with you and thanking you up and down. You got to put the bad stuff behind you and just focus on the good.
Yeah, and find a happy hobby. Do that too.
Yeah. You gotta have something else outside of this, because claims is not it. If you're in this world, in the claims world for happiness, you're not going to get much out of it.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me. Next time let's force Jared to come on too. And for everyone who's listening, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. Yeah. Please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also find us on YouTube at Claims Never Sleep Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep Podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell